Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's CITI program webinar. Today's topic is successfully navigating subrecipient monitoring, and it will be presented by Beth Kingsley and Robert Prentiss from Yale University. Just a few quick notes. This webinar will be recorded and the recording will be available on the CITI program's website. This webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not designed to provide legal advice or legal guidance. You should consult with your organization's attorneys if you have questions or concerns about the relevant laws and regulations that may be discussed in this webinar. In addition, the views expressed in the webinar are solely those of the presenters. Now, let me tell you about today's presenters. Beth has been involved in research administration for over a decade and has worked all phases of the grant lifecycle. She currently manages Yale University's central office team tasked with drafting and negotiating outgoing sub-awards, conducting risk assessments, and monitoring Yale's subrecipients. Beth is active in both Ancura and FDP. Robert performs subrecipient monitoring in the Office of Sponsored Projects at Yale University. He has volunteered with the Federal Demonstration Partnership since 2014 and is currently co-chair of the Expanded Clearinghouse Subcommittee. And now I'm going to pass the mic to you, Robert.
So today we have three primary learning objectives. First of all, we're going to go through the regulations that govern subrecipient monitoring, and those will be sprinkled throughout the duration of this presentation. We will also delve into risk assessment requirements for those regulations and look into potential applications of those regulations. And finally, we'll take that even deeper and go into subrecipient monitoring as it applies to invoices. Some sponsors require approval for subrecipients. So if an entity was proposed as a contractor and it's determined they need to actually be a subrecipient, there's no guarantee the sponsor will even approve that request. One of the things that we definitely look at is whether or not they are receive a single audit each year. The single audit does not necessarily mean that they're low risk automatically, but it does mean that they are receiving annual independent audits, that they have internal controls. Those internal controls are being reviewed. So we put together a collection of common concerns that we've experienced in the past, as well as ways to try to mitigate some of that risk. So insufficient internal controls, that's something that you may especially see a lot for subrecipients that are not subject to the single audit. There's a few different ways to help make sure essentially that they're spending those funds appropriately.
The pass-through entity can perform an on-site review, and we now live in the age of the remote on-site review, and that's often quite helpful. In rare occasions, the pass-through entity can pay to have a limited audit performed of the subrecipient. This would be in unusual situations where the assistance can't be provided directly. Unusually large personnel costs or large costs at the very end of the project, those could indicate a cost transfer. And there are some regulations involving cost transfers that are useful to keep in mind.
And speaking of subscribing, I would like to also invite you to subscribe to our podcast On Campus with CITI program, as well as our weekly newsletter. Again, I'd like to thank the presenters for today's presentation. I would also like to thank you, our audience, for some really great questions. I invite you to review our content offerings regularly as we are continually adding new courses and webinars in various areas of research, ethics, compliance, and professional development throughout the year. And in particular, you may be interested in our grants and research administration courses and webinars, including our Essentials of Grant Proposal Development course. And with that, that concludes our webinar. Have a great day.